Hello friends, welcome to Universe of Naruto X. If you love Naruto what if stories and anime explanations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now let's begin today's story. The damp, stale air made him WSE. The small squeaks and shuffling of rats hiding among the shadows of the room disgusted him, and the stupid guard asleep while he should be guarding was annoying him. Naruto slowly stood up from the heap they dared to call a bed and curled his lip in distaste at the rags they gave him as clothes if the why could even be called such sackcloth, several holes in plenty of places and smelling like they had been sealed into a room for several long years. Oh yeah, he was definitely getting out of here. Forming a few quick hand seals, he slammed his hands down onto the floor and in a small puff of smoke, a toad, which reached just above his ankles, sat looking around confusedly for a few moments before he looked up to Blonde, nodded silently and watched in morbid fascination as the toad's throat expanded and with a strangled croak puked up several plastic bags, each covered in some stomach fluid, salive. And God knew what else. Its job done, the toad vanished in a puff of blinked as he stared down at the packages at his feet. That's still so absolutely disgusting. The Blonde let out a small shudder, but as the guard's snores reached him, he snapped out of his small daze and began relieving the small bags of their contents. 2 kanai pouches, his regular clothes, his lightsaber, some soldier pills, blood pills, ninja wire, a few storage scrolls. Yep, it was all changing his clothes. He looked to the sleeping guard. He closed his eyes and sighed before tossing a cane, piercing the man's heart, killing him instantly. He never liked killing. He hated it actually. And he hoped he never grew to even remotely enjoy the act. Because the day he did was the day he went into early retirement. He knew that this was a necessary part of being a ninja, and hell, even a Jedi on some occasions needed to kill. That fact had been drilled into him by Jiraiya more than anyone. They had been in a small skirmish against some Odo nins along the border at one point during his training trip. That's where he had taken his first kill. He was no older than 18. Snapping out of his daze, the Blonde gathered the rest of the items under his arm, and with the flick of a button, the blade of the lightsaber flared to life, bathing the dark room in its purple. A single thrust, the blade pierced the stone wall deeply, melting the rock on contact. The heat was so great it reached Naruto's face quite strongly. Slowly tracing a human-sized hole along the stone, Naruto prayed the shift changes wouldn't come in yet. It would be better to stay hidden for as long as he completed the human-sized circle, he threw out a mighty kick, and with a loud crash, the stone crumbled to pieces, revealing the next cell of But more importantly, Miss Me, Tenten, took you long enough, she said absently from her place on a bed on the other side of the room. Though she continued to watch the lightsaber with unveiled admiration and amazement, she really wanted one of those things for smirked, remembering just how his roundabout plan had come about. After almost 2 weeks of surveillance over the base of the man they had found out was named Kimiharo, brought them plenty of frustration. Nyakugan was able to get a decent picture of the outer defenses, which included sentries, guard towers, motion sensors, D lights, and surveillance cameras. And that was just on the outside of the base. The base being 3 stories high and having 3 more sub-levels if the blueprints Tazuna had shown them was anything to go by. And it practically ran the length of the whole island. Think Alcatraz. Only stealth experts wouldn't have trouble getting past all of these security measures that in a genjutsu expert. Unfortunately, they didn't have a genjutsu expert or a stealth expert. So, they most likely would have been discovered very quickly or made a great big mess on their way in. Something they didn't want because walking into a fight against unknown enemy numbers or skill was a death wish. And if they had come up with a simple but effective plan, 2 of the team would be captured. Then they'd escape from their cell, cut the power to the base, which would leave enough time for the other 2 to get in. The reason they had chosen Naruto and Tenten for the job was because Lee couldn't be discreet even if his life depended on it, and Neji's eyes were a dead giveaway on his status as a ninja. So Naruto and Tenten had been chosen for the smirked before tossing her clothes. She caught them and smiled gratefully. Naruto turned, allowing her to change with some semblance of privacy. You know you owe me an explanation, she said after a moment. I do. He shot back innocently. Don't play dumb with me, nah. He smiled somewhat sheepishly. He knew damn well what she was talking about. When they were being bullied around by some thugs, he had pulled the ever so handful Jedi mind trick and had convinced the simpleton guards that they were subdued prisoners and were also good friends of Zuna. That could be you. Said later as collateral, knowing that he would have to explain the technique either to her or Tosaid when they gave in the mission report, he sighed and began speaking. It's a fairly simple technique, almost like the Yamanakas. I don't know much about the mechanics, but you basically suggest things to the person's mind, and if they're weak enough, they succumb to it. If they have enough mental strength, then they can resist it. Awfully handy for missions like this. A moment of silence. Your new techniques let you manipulate the minds of others. There was a hint of astonishment and trepidation in her voice as she nodded without turning to face her. Somewhat. He hesitated, not wanting to mention the Force's ability that allowed him to read the mind of others. It was well known that those extremely strong in the Force could even read your deepest, darkest memories, interpret your emotions, and even foretell the future with good chances of success. He didn't have the finesse nor the experience required for such a thing, but one day he might. So far, I've only experimented with suggestion, but with enough refinement, it could be possible to manipulate anything in the mind. I don't know. Another lull as Tent seemed to mull over his not being able to stand her sitting behind him. In silence, he spoke up. Are you done getting dressed? Oh yeah, sure. Narrat sighed in something akin to relief as he turned around. He held the kanai pouches in his hand, ready to toss them to her. But as he turned fully around, he noticed her already strapping her own kanai pouches to her thighs. Where do you get that? He asked, looked up. Chocolate brown eyes shining curiously. Get what? The kanai pouches. The ones I had for you are still here in my hand. Both of them. So where did you get those? I hid them. Healthy pause. Where they changed us into these rags. How the hell where did you hide them? A short silence as Tenton smirks wolfishly. That's my secret. Another short silence. Tenton, when this mission is done, we really need to talk. Tenton shrugged. Yeah. Hey. Yeah, whatever. Now, come on. We need to get started. Where's the generator room? Na took out a sketch of the layout of the base, which they drew out from some old blueprints Zuna had dug up. Because the place was built in Waves territory, the blueprints had to be given to the standing government. Na looked over the sketch and spoke up. Okay, we're in the basement right now. We get out of here, head left, go down the hall, and down 2 more levels. The generator room should be there. We knock that out. It should take 5 to 10 minutes for them to activate the second generator. I'd be really great to knock them both out to knock down the power entirely, but the second generator is on the other side of the compound. So, I guess this will have to do. Tenton nodded as he rolled up the sketch. With another flick, his lightsaber flared to life, and he cut open the bars, releasing them both as they rushed down the hull with all the speed and stealth they possessed. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. A few minutes later, after dodging and sneaking past some patrols along the hallway, the two found themselves in the large power room, which consisted of one massive generator and a control room to manage the massive thing. Judging by the design of the generator and overall layout of the area, Tenton deduced that it was powered by water currents. Most likely, it was powered by an underground river. Feeling a tap on her shoulder, she turned her head to look at Naruto as he gestured toward a large power box on the far featuring side of the room. Making sure no one could see them, the two moved swiftly to their new objective. Opening it, Tenton found 3 large levers which were each labeled Generator 1, Generator 2, and Generator 3. She deduced that the large generator must have 3 areas in which the power must be distributed. So disabling this should effectively cut the power. That it? She heard Na question. At her nod, she watched as he removed his lightsaber from his belt and flicked it on. Stepping back to give him room, she watched him lazily swing the blade, the purple arch, beautiful and graceful, at least until it slammed into the breakers, sending hundreds of sparks flying everywhere. The lights flickered for a moment before the entire room was bathed in darkness. Only the purple glow of the lightsaber illuminated them for a brief moment before Naruto turned it off, leaving them in absolute darkness. They heard the guards and engineers' shocked and outraged voices as they tried to deduce what had caused the generator to fail. They saw the flashlights flick on as the men scurried about the room. One was coming closer to the power box. In a second, Naruto turned and picked her up in his arms. She bit back a startled cry and felt the wind whip past her hair. And when she blinked, the darkened world came back into focus, and she noticed that she was back at the entry point of the room. Na then ran up the stairs as silently as he could, not stopping until he rose from the third subble up to the second subble. When he set her down, she immediately turned to face her. What the hell was that? The only person I've ever seen move that fast as Lee without his weights. Na had the decency to look embarrassed. Well, I are another one of the abilities I made as being able to increase my speed exponentially, almost 3 or 4 times my normal speed. Tenten's eyes narrowed. You sure seem to have learned a whole lot of different things during this training trip of yours. A bit too much. Na raised a single eyebrow, and she noticed some of the playfulness leave his eyes as he spoke. Yeah, well, Jiraiya is a sin, a perverted one, but he was the one who trained the fourth. Even though the abilities and form of chakra I discovered and created are good, we still don't know what kind of side effects these will have in the long run. So, while it may seem like a great thing, it could still screw me over in the long run. That's not what I mean, nah. She said, seriously, it sometimes takes people several months, even years to make one original technique. You're not only discovering a new form of chakra or energy or whatever, and creating what seems like a good deal of potent and powerful techniques, and that lightsaber thing in just 3 years is a bit of a stretch even for you. Naruto knew she had a point, and in truth, that was one of his worries when he had first told the council of the abilities he had. The only thing that probably saved him was Jiraiya, who had made some logs and showed it to them as evidence of the progress he had demonstrated during the training trip. These new techniques. Naruto sighed and rubbed his forehead. Look, just drop it. I have these techniques and that's all that really matters now. So, let's just get on with the mission. After a brief moment, she spoke. All right, but still that leaves us with a small problem. It's pitch black. I can't see anything. Naruto smirked before he grabbed her hand. Come on, I can see just fine. We need to find a hiding spot and then contact Lee and Nei. XXXXXXXXXXXXX. Meanwhile, with Lee and Nei, few things in this world bothered Hyuga Neji, but he could safely say that this mission was the worst of his relatively short ninja career. To start things off, he had managed to cut his hair with that fancy sword, which then led to a 4-hour-long chaz by his spandex-wearing teammate, which ended when he had torn off his sleeve to use as a makeshift bandage in order to fix his hair into a ponytail, along with Tenten wrapping the green-clad ninja in ninja wire. Then after that, he had gotten to Zuna's house and had been subjected to living with Na, something that he knew he would never ever do again. The house had 2 spare bedrooms, which meant that the boys stayed in one room and Tenten got the other. And of course, Naruto snored loudly. Then, to add insult to injury, the blonde was quite energetic in the morning, as was Lee. So, while he didn't let you sleep at all during the night, their loud and incessant chatter gave you a throbbing headache in the morning. And now here he was, sleep deprived, hair still cropped up in a ponytail, a headache because Lee wouldn't shut up and trying to sneak into a base of some jackass who wanted to take over Wave Country by means of a sewer. He was trudging through a damn sewer. They decided that it would be the best entry point because of what they hoped would be a lack of security, and because it was an area that they could be almost certain of an easy escape route should push come to shove. He still didn't like it, though. He blamed Naruto for this in some twisted, strange way. The blonde was responsible for all of his misfortune. He didn't have proof to back up his accusations. But yes, the blonde was responsible for every bad thing that had happened on this mission. In fact, every mission he took with the blonde always ended with him getting up. First, the mission to retrieve Sasaki. What did he get? An arrow through his shoulder and nearly dying from blood loss. The mission to rescue Gar. He and his team had to fight Kisame, one of the Akatsuki, barely managing to beat the Shark Man and then having to fight some weird clones of Now. They were on this mission in which he had gone through all this crap. Oh yes, he would pay. He would make sure of that. Somehow some way Nei would make sure he paid for these transgressions. XXXXXXXXX. Meanwhile, with Naruto and Tenten, the 2 Konoha ninja found themselves hiding in the spacious air ducts of the installation. Na watched as below him, the guards, armed with flashlights, continued to scurry about, their alert level up as they suspected someone had infiltrated the base. Tenten calmly placed the two-way radio earpiece on her ear, and spoke in a hushed tone. Neji, Lee, are you guys alright? Have you made it inside yet? Lee's voice came from the other end. Tenten-chan, my youthful comrade. It is good to hear your voice again. Yeah, thanks Lee. Nice to hear you too. Listen, what's the deal? Are you guys in yet? We're not sure how much longer the power will be down, so pick it up. Tenten-chan, we are currently in the building, but we have made a slight alteration to our original plan. What did you do? We have changed our entry point. We are in what seems to be in a storage room. Na find the storage room in the blueprints. Na again unrolled the sketch as he began looking over the blueprints. They're on the other side of the compound. She stayed silent for a moment, debating in her mind of the pros and cons over this slight alteration to their original plan. All right, guys, keep moving up. Find Kimihara when you do complete the mission. We'll radio you or you'll radio us and we pull out. Clear. Right, came Lee and Nei's reply from the other side of the radio before it went silent. She sighed, placing the radio back in her pocket before she looked back to Na, finding his slightly shocked gaze on her. What? Nothing. I just always figured it was Nei who gave the orders on this team. She shrugged. It depends, really. Sometimes I have the answers, he doesn't, and sometimes Lee has the answers we don't. It's a give and take kind of thing. None of us are the leaders. He nodded and again rolled up the sketch as he placed it in his pocket again. Moving as slowly as possible so as not to make too much sound in the cramped space of the air duct. Let's go, she nodded. And together the two began crawling their way through the aluminum tunnel. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX with Lee and Nei using the Bakugan to pierce through the surrounding darkness. The two easily avoided the guards that patrolled the hall, making their way up the levels of T. He compounded as stealthily as possible. Finally, after a few minutes of searching through various hallways and avoiding even more sentries, the two finally found the room in which Kimihara was resting. It was easy to deduce this because the man had two guards outside the door and because there was a shitload of money inside of a safe in the room. Obviously, this man was just as money obsessed as Gadu was. Neji turned to Lee and spoke into his ear. After a moment, Lee nodded and vanished in a green blur before two thumps were heard down the hallway. Neji smirked. Lee's prowess in speed and taijutsu were certainly valuable assets for a mission like this. Forming two quick buncheons and using a henge to make them look like the guards, Lee and Neji dragged the two, now unconscious guards into the room of their target. The door wasn't even locked. Dumb. The two entered the room and closed the door silently behind him. As they did so, Neji immediately noticed the soft illumination of the hallway lights flickering on. He sighed in relief. If they had turned on a moment sooner, they would have been discovered and gotten into a really big mess. Neji activated his Bakugan again, making sure there were no traps or tripwires before he walked silently towards the sleeping man. Just like Gao, he was fat, probably no taller than 57, balding in the perfect picture of a corporate pig. Neji's hand faintly glowed with chakra before he slammed it over the man's heart, stopping it instantly. A quiet, quick death, most likely better than he deserved. Neji sighed before turning to a Grimmel-looking Lee. All right, let's radio Tenten and Naru. He paused as he heard a strange sound directly above him. It was like groaning metal just before it. Neji leapt back as something large and apparently heavy fell over the area he had been standing on just a moment ago. Lee by reflex took up a fighting stance at least until they heard the familiar voice of Wanazumaki narrate. OWWW. He groaned as he pulled himself out of the busted remains of the air vent. Are you okay? They heard their other teammate call from above as her head poked out from the air vent. Just peachy. He gasped out as he rolled onto his back. Neji sighed and reached down to grab Naruto's arm and hauling him up to his feet. Damn it, Na, you really need to be more careful. Na shook his head, trying to clear the cobwebs. Neji, what are you doing here? He spoke somewhat dazedly as Tenten leapt down from the air vent. Narrate, __, my youthful comrade. Nei and I have already finished our assignment. Now we just need to make our escape. Lee somehow managed to yell while whispering, something that should be physically impossible, but Lee somehow pulled it off. Na looked to the dead man on the bed and could only think of one thing to say. Oh. A short pause. Well, An escape route is fairly easy, he said as he began walking to the window. The rest of the team shrugged as they began following. That was true. Getting in was hard. Getting out is easy. Nay, however, caught the sight of a pressure device on the edge of the window. His eyes widened as he looked back into the hallway, noticing again that the lights were on. That meant that Na stopped, but it was too late. With a small heave, the blonde pulled open the window, and in a second, red lights began flashing as horns blared. But what really took the cake was the great big iron barricade that just slammed down in front of the window, effectively keeping people out, but also locking him in. Na, Tenten, Lee, and Nei exchanged a glance, which spoke some very clear and simple words. Oh, who the hell ever said getting out was the easy part? The alarms flared to life around the group of Konohanans, and in just seconds, they could hear a multitude of footsteps running down the hallways. Immediately, the door burst open, revealing several of the thug mercenaries coming to protect their employer. The first 4 that entered the door had their throats immediately impaled by Tenten's kunai. As more men continued to pour into the room, intent on rushing them, the 4 ninjas spread apart, 2 moving to each side of the bed to leave enough room for them to fight properly. Tenten took out 2 kunai from her pouch, where she then methodically proceeded to cut down all the thugs that rushed her in an impressive but nonetheless brutal display of her knife fighting skills. Neji and Lee, using their respective taijutsu styles, also did quite well for themselves, easily killing any that approached them. Lee snapping necks and breaking bones. Neji using the Juken to cause blinding pain and near-instant deaths. While Naruto using a single blade of his lightsaber, seeing as how the cramped space of the room would lead him to injure his friends if he activated the second blade. Most of his jutsu, including summoning, Rinnegan, and shadow clones would also prove to be more of a hindrance in this fight than an asset. So, he was down to the lightsaber and force techniques. Should be more than enough to handle a few simple thugs. The purple blade hummed as he cut through the mercenaries with almost ridiculous ease. The smell of burnt flesh assaulted his nostrils, making him cringe slightly. He ignored it, however, and used his lightsaber to block a swing from another of the thugs, which resulted in his opponent's sword being cut in half before he cut another deep gash across the man's chest. The wound instantly cauterizing itself from the unimaginable heat the beam generated. The 4 Konoha shinobi immediately ran out of the room and into the hallway, each looking to make sure there were no enemies in their current area. Neji, what's the best escape route? Neatly activated his Bakugan. His expression visibly tightened as he spoke. We're completely surrounded, and all the hallways I can see are packed with soldiers. Looks like we're not getting out of here without a fight. The group fell into a momentary silence which was broken surprisingly by Lee. My youthful comrades, we must split up. The narrow halls will only serve to hinder our respective fighting styles if we do not. The group exchanged some worried glances before they each nodded. All right, Tenten and I will go this way. You guys go the other way. Don't make me have to come back and save you. The blonde ninja smirked at the 2 as he took a quick jab at their skills. Neji too allowed himself a slow smirk to cross his otherwise impassive features. I could say the same to you. He shot back before he turned sharply on his heel. Come on, Lee. Lee offered a quick nice guy pose, complete with his signature ping smile, which stung Naruto's eyes and made him see dots as his vision distorted. He tried to clear his vision by blinking and rubbing his eyes, but it proved fruitless. Come on, Na, Tenten said after a moment before she dragged him down their end of the hall. I can't see a damn thing, he muttered to himself as Tenten continued to drag him down the hallway by his wrist. XXXXXXXXXXXXX Lee and Nei ran until they reached the end of the hallway where it split up into 2 separate directions. Which way do we go? Lee questioned as he heard the footsteps coming closer towards them. Neji activated his Bakugan again and found a small secret doorway down the hallway to their right which led to a secret passage which Nei was almost certain it would lead to an exit. He was about to speak when the 2 suddenly heard a voice shout out behind them. Hey, I found the intruders. The 2 spun around and saw about 2 or 3 dozen mercenaries appear in the hallway at the Mon's call before they rushed the 2 Konohanans. Neji was about to tell Lee to follow when Lee suddenly grabbed his arm. Come, Nei, we must leave. Before he took off down the opposite hallway, further and further away from the quick escape route. No, wait, you idiot. But it was no use. Lee just kept on running with the Merc army hot on their heels. XXXXX. Meanwhile, Tenten continued to drag Naruto down their end of the hallway where the two came across an indoor garden filled with yellow orchids. A small soccer tree and fountain. Oddly peaceful considering who the owner of the base was. They were currently standing on the second level. One level above them, one obviously below them. Okay, I think our best bet would be to head to the roof. The structure is probably weakest there. I can use my explosive tags to blast a hole into the roof. Na said dazedly as he continually tried to blink away the blurriness that clouded his vision thanks to Lee's way to bright smile. What the hell did he brush his teeth with? Bleach Tenten, having had her attention diverted to tracking the numerous footsteps in their area, didn't really hear him, and so it was not surprising when she turned and spoke. What ya say? Just as Naruto was about to speak up again, an arrow whizzed by his head. Due to his still blurry vision, he did not know the exact location of his attacker, but he did know the general area the individual was in due to his force awareness. Tenden too knew where the attacker was, but unlike him, she could see him and therefore wasted no time in leaping up to the third-floor balcony, leaving her unknown to her, blind Na completely alone as she attacked the archer with her canny Tenten. He questioned as he suddenly realized her presence was missing from his side. He heard her grunts and battle cries from his position and tried to follow her voice. God damn it, Lee. Next time I see you, I'm going to knock those teeth right out of your mouth. He muttered angrily to himself as he continued to stumble across the hallway. Naruto, what the hell are you doing? Tenten yelled from the third floor, still unaware of the blonde's predicament as more men appeared from the various hallways. I told you, damn it, I can't see. The force-wielding ninja cried out as he reached a staircase, stumbling slightly before he fell into a tangled heap of limbs and clothing at the bottom of the stairs. Oh. Yali was definitely going to die. Naruto opened his eyes and finally realized that the blurriness had cleared from his vision. Of course, it couldn't happen before he fell down the damn stairs. No, of course not. That would have been a good thing and just for today the gods or the force or whatever was hoping to with him. Na stood up and walked into the open garden where he heard Tenten's voice coming from the third floor. He looked up as one of the hired men was kicked off the balcony. With a rather loud scream, he landed at Naruto's feet head first, his brain spilling out onto the floor. Na looked at the dead body, then back up as another individual. This one riddled with Kana, and Shuriken followed the earlier Mon's example and took the expressway down. Damn, was the only thing he could think as he looked back up at her apparent position on the third floor. He was about to jump up when he felt someone else behind him. He spun around, igniting the lightsaber before he cut another arrow aimed for his left shoulder. With his other hand, he sent a relatively strong force push to the Mon's direction, sending him crashing into the wall behind him, his head hitting with a loud crack. He fell to the floor, either dead or unconscious. Na again turned and saw Tenten was cornered now. He was about to leap up to help her when he saw her smirk. Pausing before his leap, he watched as she reached into her kanai pouch before she pulled out 2 smoke bombs before. She threw them onto the floor, covering the area she had previously occupied with smoke. Na saw her form leap out from the smoke, landing on the other end of the balcony, giving her a brief moment to breathe as the men scrambled after her. Her smirk grew before she reached into her pouch and pulled out a pair of gloves. Naruto blanched, thinking the weapon specialist had mastered Sakura's strength technique. The thought of another girl his age with such a monstrous power definitely did not make him feel at ease. Tenten swiftly put the gloves on and with a truly evil smile that would have made Anko proud, the girl looked down to his form and smirked. Hey Na, now you're going to find out just why they say I'm the best weapon mistress in Konoha. Na raised an eyebrow before he watched the thugs approach her. As she finished putting the gloves on, she raised a single slender arm before she snapped her fingers. Naruto's sharp eyes caught the small distortion of light which extended from her fingers by the motion. What in the world? Naruto's and everyone else's eyes widened as the 3 men closest to her suddenly lost their heads. Literally, 6 thuds were heard as both heads and bodies fell to the floor. One of the heads rolled through the railing and fell to the 3rd floor again at Naruto's feet. The blonde twitched in mild irritation before he looked back up at Tenten. The girl smirked at the mercenary's stupefied expression before she moved her right hand in a sweeping motion. The next 7 men couldn't even react before they were sliced up, each being cut in numerous and distinct ways. The men who had took out the bows and fired on the weapon mistress with their arrows, not wanting to get close to her. The arrows didn't get to approach her before they were also cut up in midair. Tenten smirked again before she sent her attacks forward, cutting down the entire group before her in seconds even as they tried to flee. Na watched the entire proceeding with his mouth agape, eyes wide and eyebrows raised as limbs fell around his person. Holy shit, he muttered when the spectacle was over. Unfortunately, one of the men Tenten had just cut up also had an explosive in his hand. Said hand had been one of the ones that had fallen from the 3rd balcony and was now just a few feet away from the blonde, the fuse still burning. Apparently, the man had intended to throw it at Tenten, but his limb was timely sliced off from the rest of his body. Unfortunately, the blonde still didn't notice it because he was busy staring at Tenten as she sat on the railing, laughing at his expression. Wow, he said after a moment, not having another word he could find to describe the display. Tenten smirked, showing off the glove and the small metal wires attached to its fingertips. I know, right, it's my own invention. Guy-sensei helped me do it. My natural elemental affinity is earth. Obviously, earth doesn't have anywhere near the cutting power of wind, which is what I use to power these gloves. A seal inside the glove itself converts a portion of my chakra into the wind element. So, these wires are infused with both the wind and earth element. Earth for durability and easier control, and wind for the cutting edge it has. Her smile was almost radiant as she eyed her gloves pridefully. Narad nodded a praising lie. That's really good, Tenten, he said, obviously impressed. Tenten smirked again, but just then she saw the smoke from the fuse. Na jump, she cried out in alarm. Na spun on his heel. Seeing the bomb about 7 feet away, his eyes widened in momentary panic before he sent another strong push using the force, sending the bomb towards the other end of the room. It didn't even make it halfway before the fuse burnt out and the bomb exploded. The shock wave knocked Narad off his feet and nearly knocked Tenten off her perch. Na heard a loud cracking and rumbling and felt the ground shift beneath him. His eyes snapped open before he saw a large jagged crack appear on the floor of the indoor garden before it buckled and collapsed entirely. With a startled yell ripped from his throat, Naruto fell into the darkness below. XXXXXXXXX. Meanwhile, with Lee and Nei, the 2 Konohan ninja continued to practically bulldozer their way through the maze that was the compound. There were a lot of mercenaries after them. The confined space, while it got rid of the numerical advantage, also made it extremely difficult for them to fight properly. This was especially true for Lee, seeing as how the greatest asset of his taijutsu rested in his quick footwork and kicks. And Neji, while his taijutsu remained relatively unhampered, except for maybe a technique like the Kaiden, hardly practiced any form of kenjutsu, except for the simple academy basics. He had always counted on his speed to allow him to maneuver around attacks with close-range weapons where he would finish them with a quick juke and strike, or at least weaken them. But again, in this narrow hall, his maneuvering skills were also severely hampered. So, they were currently running from the large group of mercenaries directly behind them while bashing their way past any stragglers in front of hoping to find an exit soon. Damn it, Lee, this is all your fault. But Neji, my youthful comrade, this predicament we currently find ourselves in is no one's fault. Why would you blame it on me? Because damn it, if you had listened to me back there and turned around, we would already be out of air. The Hyuga prodigy exclaimed. Nee, do not worry. I am certain there will be another secret passage we can use soon if we keep on running. Watch. I shall find one for you, my youthful comrade. Lee yelled enthusiastically before he dashed ahead. Nei cursed as he tried to keep up, only to see the green blur dash around the corner before he heard his voice. This way, Neji growled before he sped up, trying to catch up with his green-clad teammate. Neji heard a great crash and paused. Something told him he was not going to like what came with that crash. A tingle went up his spine. His palms felt sweaty, and he felt, and sure enough, Lee skidded back and bolted towards him. Not that way, not that way. Nei watched as Lee shot past him and looked down the hallway where even more mercenaries were charging them. These clad in black armor that appeared to have a good deal of knowledge on kenjutsu judging from their stance. God damn it, Lee. The Hyuga prodigy cursed as he spun on his heel and rushed down the hallway following the taijutsu specialist, all the while cursing his existence and lack of stealth skills. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX and coughed. God, that is nasty. Na continued to gag, which only got worse as he observed his surroundings. Rust-covered pipes, moss, and fungus-covered concrete, and a literal river of crap rushing past him. He was in a sewer. He gagged some more and spit in order to get that decidedly nasty taste out of his mouth as the radio on his side flared to life with Tenton's voice. Na, are you okay? Answer me. He grabbed the radio and spoke into it. I'm fine, Tenton. He heard her visibly sigh with relief as she spoke again. Oh. Good. Scared me there for a moment. Where are you? Na looked around for a moment. You don't want to know. He answered after a moment. Whatever. Can you get back up here? Na looked to the rubble that had collapsed next to him, blocking out his entry point. I could use the lightsaber to cut through the rubble, but that could cause another cave-in. Let's not risk it. Try to get out from where you are. I'll keep heading up to the roof and we'll meet up at Zuna's house like we agreed. Roger, he said, hearing her radio click off. He turned to look at the darkness of the tunnel before him, as well as the river of stuff he had to make his way to. Row. I blame Lee for this, he muttered to himself before he started his disgusting trudge through the sewers. XXXXXX. A few minutes later, Tenton found herself on the attic of the compound. She had noticed the first time she saw the blueprints that this was one of the only areas of the compound that was not covered with concrete, and therefore it was the easiest area to escape from. So placing her explosive tags in a circular pattern on the roof, she took cover behind one of the crates as the explosions went up. Smirking at her handiwork, she gracefully leapt through the newly made exit and onto the outside roof. Now all she had to do was head to the south side of the compound, walk across the ocean, and wait for the rest of the team at Zuna's house. XXXXXX. Meanwhile, with Lee and Nay, Lee, I hate you. Such were the angry words of one Hyuga Neji as the two found themselves cornered by the mercenary thugs. Lee had once again taken another wrong turn, which had led Neji in his attempt to warn the boy to follow. And now they were being consistently pushed back further and further into the dead-end hallway they currently found themselves in. Each mercenary they struck down or injured was easily replaced by a new one. As the horde seemed endless, Ni, do not worry. The flames of youth shall always prevail. We shall triumph over this obstacle. Our flames of youth shall not be snuffed out. Nay shook his head and resisted the urge to bang his head against the wall. Lee, for the love of God, there is no such thing as flames of youth, and every time you speak about it, you sound ridiculous. So, would you please allow me to die with some semblance of dignity and not say that in front of so many people? Lee looked completely appalled by what Nay had just stated and spoke. Neji, how can you say such a thing? Nay gritted his teeth. You know what? Fine. Prove it. Prove to me that the flames of youth are real. If you can find us one damn escape route that does not involve us having to kill this entire group of mercenaries, then fine, I will acknowledge that the flames of youth exist. Lee visibly straightened and began looking around the hallway frantically for some kind of exit. A snort from one of the mercs brought his attention to a small metal door next to the man that had snorted, who was just behind the guy in the front row. He saw that right above the door was a sign which read in big bold letters laundry chute. Lee paused, his eyes rolling up to his head as he put two and two together. Before anyone could react, Lee unstrapped the two orange weights from his legs and threw them with all his might into the group of mercs in front of them. They tumbled back over one another due to the insane force the weights were thrown with. Before Nay could react, he felt Lee grab him by the back of the jacket, drag him forward, and dash to the laundry chute. What the hell? Nay yelled as Lee stuffed him in there, jumping in himself a second later. Nay yelled as he landed in one of the industrial-sized hampers. The impact made the item roll forward, pulling another hamper chain to it forward in time to catch Lee as well. Neji and Lee both pulled themselves up after a few moments. Neji panted slightly as he looked at Lee, who had landed on some fluffy white towels. Not bad, Lee. Lee smiled and was about to give his ping smile when something caught his eye. His smile immediately fell from his lips as his eyes took on a glint of fear. Lee immediately tensed. Nothing ever made Lee stop smiling. Ever. He followed Lee's gaze and noticed just what he was looking at. He was looking at the pile of clothes he had landed on. Neji looked down and immediately tensed, his form shaking with rage as his face twisted in disgust. He reached up onto his head and pulled off an article of clothing from his hair. Jock straps. He had landed in jock straps. His face reamed with rage as his Bakugan involuntarily flared. Suddenly, the Hyuga prodigy spun around and latched his fingers around Lee's neck, lifting him and shaking him violently. I'm going to kill you, Lee. His revenge was interrupted, however, as the two heard a clanging noise above them. They looked up in time to see several fuse bombs fall onto Lee's hamper. Neji and Lee's eyes widened. Oh. Me. Boom. XXXXXXX. Tenten stumbled and fell as an explosion blew out an entire wall of the compound behind her. She spun around, her wired gloves at the ready as she watched the raging fire for a few moments, ready for any enemy that might emerge. Suddenly, two familiar figures stumbled out of the flames, both completely covered in soot, their clothes singed and burnt off in several places. Tenten sighed in obvious relief as she rushed forward and hugged her two teammates. Geez, couldn't you guys be just a bit more subtle? She said sarcastically after a moment. Lee was about to speak when Neji covered his mouth. Go. He gritted out as he looked around. Where's Na? We got separated. He's in the sewers trying to find a way out last I checked. Neji smiled widely, something that kind of freaked his female teammate out a little bit. Neji actually looked giddy, and Neji never looks anything even remotely related to giddy. Ah. I see. Nei spoke in a tone laced with veiled happiness. Well, then let's just make our way to Zuna's house, then. Well, wait for Naruto there. He right, Tenten agreed nervously, completely creeped out by her teammate's happy face and voice. She turned, but stumbled slightly on a loose stone. As she stumbled, a small explosive note fell from her pouch and was carried by the wind. The three watched as the small slip of paper was carried by the wind, slowly, tantalizingly shifting through the wind. Finally, it slipped through the bars of a manhole, which led into the sewers. XXXXXXX. Na cursed loudly as he continued to plow his way through the sewage. God, he needed a freaking shower after this. He paused as a small slip of paper drifted past his eyes, a paper that looked oddly like. His head snapped in the paper's direction just as the explosive tag stuck to the wall and began fizzling out. Bang. The small but loud explosion knocked the blonde back to the adjacent wall, knocking the wind right out of him and causing his head to spin. Several large cracks appeared along the wall, and the sewer started to flow into a new hole formed towards the bottom right side. Naruto, still dazed by the impact, offered little resistance as he was dragged down with the current into the newly made hole, which appeared to have opened up into an old abandoned sewer pipe before more stones from the roof fell and blocked it out. Na shook the cobwebs from his head as he stood up and began following the newly discovered passageway. At least this one was free from most of the crap the other one had. After several minutes of walking, Naruto came across the end of the pipe, which was blocked out by even more concrete. The blonde took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He tried to repeat the old Jedi code his mother had said a few times in an attempt to ease the process. There is no emotion. There is peace. There is no ignorance. There is no ash. He yelled out in anger, annoyance, and frustration as he activated his double-bladed lightsaber and promptly proceeded to burn his way through the concrete between himself and his exit. After a few seconds in which he made the circular opening, he reared back and kicked the concrete wall with all his might, sending it toppling over in a heap of rubble. As he stepped through the new door, he realized that he was inside yet another compound. As he looked around, a voice reached his ear. Who the are you? Na turned around and found a girl staring at him with a pretty pissed off expression on her face. Red hair, nice tight short shorts, a long sleeve shirt with two lengths on either side which almost reached her knee but still left her thigh. Room stomach exposed, a caney pouch on her left thigh, and an attitude to boot. He answered as best he could. Besides someone who's having a bad day, you tell me. Karen noticed the leaf forehead protector and took out her own kunai. A trespassing leaf who's about to die. Naruto's eyes widened and he then noticed a small musical note on the wall. Sound Village. The purple double-bladed lightsaber flared to life in time to deflect a thrown cane from the red-headed girl as Naruto settled himself in a defensive stance. This is wave country. Just what the hell is Sound doing here? He snarled as she took out 2 kana, placing herself in a defensive stance as they began circling each other. You're not getting out of here alive, Leaf Nin, so it doesn't matter anyway, she exclaimed before throwing a kana above him, cutting a ninja wire which held the stones of the roof in place. Naruto's head snapped up in time to watch the stones of the roof collapse. Karen smirked, but it died quickly as the young blonde-haired Leaf Nin held up his hand and the boulders that had been falling were held up by an unseen force. He looked back at her, the smirk on his lips growing before he directed the hand towards her. The next thing she knew, the stones that had been hovering above his head were heading straight for her. Falling onto her back, she let the stones fly over her before springing back to her feet. Now on guard, her eyes narrowed as she watched the smirking Leaf Nin. There were traps all over this base and she knew the location of each and every one of them. Hence why this base required very little guards to speak of besides herself and a few others who were also trained on how to activate and avoid the traps. Still, if he could stop any incoming object like those stones, then about 40 of the traps were useless. And if that purple laser blade at his side could cut anything as easily as it did her cane, and he was fast enough with it, that was another 30 to 40 still. They could be used as distractions. Tossing another kanai so the butt of the kanana hit the tile at the boy's feet. Na heard the sound of shifting stones behind him. Turning in time to catch sight of a spiked log as it swung down from the ceiling, heading straight for him. Somersaulting above the trap, he used the lightsaber to cut the ropes which held it, letting it fall to the floor with a crash. Landing on his feet, he turned around to face Karen again, only to find the girl already in a lunge. A chakra scalpel in one hand and a curved kanai hook blade in the other. He moved to swing his lightsaber, but the hook light clashed with the hilt, gripping it safely as Karen held it in a reverse grip as she moved to stab her chakra scalpel into his eye. Grabbing her wrist, he fell back and placed his legs on her stomach, throwing her over and off him before he jumped to his feet. Spinning around, he found Karen again charging him. He extended his hand, causing the girl to stop dead as a firm grip on her neck began lifting her up above the ground. She coughed and gasped as she struggled for breath, clawing at her throat in an attempt to remove the invisible appendage, which was now cutting off her air supply. Naruto sighed as he relented his grip only slightly, allowing her enough room to breathe. Now, I'll ask again, what the hell is Sound Village doing in a place like Wave? She gasped out before she threw another kana, hitting a tile on the roof before Naruto could stop her. Before the blonde gentry could react, the floor beneath him suddenly fell open, letting out a scream of shocker. Anger. He fell down into the dark abyss beneath. As Karen held onto the edge of the trap hole, gasping and coughing for air before she pulled herself up, getting to her knees as she rubbed her throat, she growled in anger. Damn bastard. She growled before she got to her feet and stumbled over to a nearby pillar. Opening a secret compartment with her chakra, she found a small but nonetheless intricate seal within. Cutting her finger so the blood poured freely, she wiped it on the seal. Watching it pulse a few times, she formed some hand seals before she slammed her hand on the seal. Kai, she yelled, watching the purple lines extend from the seal up and down the pillar and disappearing into the ceiling and floor below. Let's see how smug you are with those little tricks now, bastard. She smirked as she adjusted her glasses and looked down into the hole he had fallen through. XXXXXXXXX. Naruto's eyes slowly opened to take in his surroundings. It was dark. It was smelly. And there were no stairs of which to speak of. God damn it. I am seriously getting tired of falling into places like this. He groaned as he stood up, cracking his neck as he looked up to the opening above. He had probably fallen a good 20 to 30 feet. A fatal fall for civilians. Thank God he wasn't a civilian then. He moved to leap up when a strange sound like that of some huge bug came from behind him. His lightsaber was currently turned off. Now he had 2 options. 1. He could simply jump for the opening which was now closing back up. He could turn the saber on and take a quick look and then he could jump and run. Every single fiber of his being was screaming at the top of its proverbial lungs to simply run. That looking back would bring absolutely nothing but pain and grief and a good deal of misfortune and annoyance to his being. But he was Uzumaki Na. So, ignoring all of his gut instincts and basic workings of human logic, his lightsaber flared to life before he turned his head to look back. What he found was a humanoid bug-like creature with the face of a human apart from the lower jaw, which was split down the middle, like an insect's, as well as some crab-like appendages for each of his arms and knees bent in the opposite direction, but was still perfectly functional, as the creature demonstrated by stepping closer to him. Its skin was black, its mandibles letting drool fall to the floor freely as it hissed at him. Na backed up and held the lightsaber in a ready stance as the creature approached, hissing and growling at him in agitation. Na was about to swing when another sound came from behind him. Now he knew he shouldn't turn around, so he didn't. Instead, he leapt up to the nearest wall, using a combination of ninja training and force manipulation to cover about half the distance before he latched onto the wall with chakra. The closing opening above, further strengthening his sense of urgency. Still not being able to help himself, he glanced to the bottom of the pit again, only to find hundreds of glowing eyes staring back at him. He could also see several of them beginning to climb the walls, too. And from the small sliver of light, he could see some of their mutated forms. They ranged from insects to reptiles, amphibians, and even fish. Letting out a small sound of pity and a vow of making the vile snake pay for this, when next he found him, the blonde leapt through the opening before it closed with a resounding clang. Standing on the now solid floor, he found Karen's smirking form. Growling in anger at the girl, seeing as how she undoubtedly knew about just what was down there, and what had happened to those people to make them that way, but still seemed so uncaring towards it made his blood boil. Next time, have a door that closes quicker. Karen nodded, the smirk still firmly on her lips. Oh. Maybe I'll get that fixed for next time. But personally, I didn't want to miss this, so I'm glad you escaped. What the hell are you talking about, Miss Wara? Na suddenly yelled before he turned and looked behind him and down to his calf, where there was a blade-like appendage right through it. Looking at the owner of said appendage was one of the creatures he had left down in that pit. Half of his torso sticking out from the floor and slowly more of it was being revealed as he pulled himself up. Naruto's eyes went wide in horror as more creatures began rising from the floor. That's right, leaf bastard. These walls and these creatures have a special ability. Orochimaru made it so their chakra and that within the seals within the walls would always move at the same frequency, if you will, which allows these little sentries to move through almost any wall in this base like they were ghosts, she said, smirking through her glasses. These guys were made by some combination of genetic engineering, mass sealing techniques, and curse seal transformation. These are the base guards made by Orochimaru himself to protect places like this. Na growled in anger before he cut off the creature's arm with the lightsaber, watching as it screeched in pain. He moved to then pull it out, but the black knife-like appendage soon melted and reformed on the creature's arm before it tried to swipe at him again. Barely reacting in time due to his shock, the blonde stepped back with a small, startled cry. Karen smirked. That instant regeneration-like feature was very useful on several occasions. What the boy didn't know was that these sentries were in an active state the entire time they were down there. And once they were activated, they would live for about 30 minutes before their bodies broke down and all vital functions ceased due to the inhuman rate their metabolism had to go to keep up. She doubted he could last that long, and if he did, she could probably pick him off in his weakened state. She frowned, however, as she caught sight of the wound on his leg sealing up in just a few short seconds. Now, that could be a problem. The only real way to kill these sentries was to destroy or damage the brain. Now, with that laser blade of his, he could accomplish that feat quite easily since none of the creatures could block it. Now, that on its own wouldn't be such a big deal since they could just swarm over him and injure him with sheer numbers. But if you throw in this guy's own healing factor, this could definitely be a problem if he discovered the way of killing them fast enough. Na cursed as he looked from one end of the hallway to the other. All around him, he could see these mutant things crawling out of the floor like some freaky garden weeds. Letting out a quick curse before he gave one last sidelong glance to Karen and ran down the hall, dodging and weaving through street ray strikes from the still rising creatures, as well as slicing off a few limbs from whatever strikes he couldn't dodge. What the hell are you idiots waiting for? Go after him, Karen barked out. The mutated creatures hissed and growled before they did as ordered. Naruto's form blurred ahead of the freaky mutants through a quick combination of chakra and force-enhanced speed. Pivoting back around as he reached an intersection in the hallway, he placed the lightsaber back on his belt before he raised his hands towards the roof. A look of concentration crossed his features as his hands slowly lowered like they were pulling something down. Loud resounding cracks and snaps were heard as the stones on the roof began to crumble as the entire base shook from the force bearing down on it. Karen snapped her head up as cracks began to form on the roof above her. She looked back to the blonde-haired kid at the end of the hall and caught his smirk before the whole roof collapsed, blocking him from sight. Acting fast, she ran to the other end of the hall, barely making it in time to avoid the crumbling roof as it collapsed. Na panted from the exertion, but the smirk still remained firmly on his lips. That is until the creature simply crawled out of the rubble, most completely unharmed. Oh yeah, I forgot about that little skill of theirs, he stated somewhat nervously as the creatures began skulking towards him like some predators that had just found their favorite prey. Forming a quick hand seal cage bunch and no jutsu, he yelled, forming 11 clones, and as 4 Narutos bolted down each hallway available to them. Momentarily confused, the creatures paused before each of them chased after a set of Narutos. Na smirked so they weren't too bright. It was at times like this he wished he knew genjutsu. That way he could make a genjutsu on them which would make it so that they would be attacking each other by making some of them look like him. But he didn't know genjutsu. So he was up shit's creek in that department, vowing to take some genjutsu lessons from Kernai. When he got back, the blonde continued running. XXXXX. Would you just admit we're lost already? You stubborn overgrown tin can. Jolie said angrily as he punched more buttons on the ship's bridge controls and glared at the younger male who was also orking the ship's controls. We're not lost, you senile old jackass. And even if we were, what the hell should I do besides what I'm doing right now, which is reconfiguring the coordinates in the ship's computer? Ask for directions. We're 7 trillion miles from the nearest planet. Beside them, the Mandalorian recruits and officers watched their fearless and cool-headed leader argue with a 70-year-old man and was currently losing the argument, seeing as how he was quickly losing his patience. How in the world do you get lost with the directions she gave you? She was very specific and told you the coordinates and precise turns and angles and all these wonderful numbers to help guide you. You sir are by far the worst pilot this side of the galaxy. Karth, despite all his crashes, is a much better pilot than you. The older man accused angrily as he pointed dramatically. In case you didn't notice, old man, we're not in a galaxy anymore, and unless you want me to kick your wrinkly old carcass out the airlock, you'll shut your mouth and let me wreck. Configure these coordinates in peace. That is, of course, unless you think you can do better. You know what, you little bastard, move, Jolie said, standing up and walking over to the coordinate panel as he shoved him out of the way. Hearing a faint echoing laughter to his right, he shifted his eyes to Revan's ghost-like form. Looking to Candora's as the man stood behind him, he could immediately tell he was the only one who could sense her. I've missed all this. You two never change, she said with a small smile. Revan, quick, tell me what were the coordinates. He communicated mentally to the younger woman. She smiled, always trying to put the young people in their place. Hey, Jolie, she questioned as she laughed. He shot a mental glare her way before she spoke. Oh. All right then, she said before standing and walking over to the panel. He followed her fingers and pressed the buttons she pressed her motion to press. He heard her calming laughter one more time before she finally vanished, a sound that brought a delighted smile to his own lips. It had been so long since he had heard her laugh. He missed it. Still, as the engine hummed back to life and the feminine voice of the computer reached his ears, coordinate S accepted restarting hyperdrive. Now, he couldn't help but put that smug smirk back on his lips as Candice crossed his arms with a huff. Whatever, old man, get the hell off my bridge. Jolie's smile widened as he bowed mockingly. As you wish, your terrible Mandalorian-ness, he said before he began making his way out of the bridge. Before he got to the exit, however, he stopped, startled as a harsh, cold, cruel presence made itself known to his senses. His eyes, though physically blind, could still see much farther than most, maybe even farther than Revan herself. And as he turned to face the main window of the ship's bridge, which stared straight out into the black abyss of space. What he saw terrified him. Clothes black as the void of space, eyes hollow and dead, a mask which resembled a skull covering his features. The man slowly turned to face him, and as he did, Jolie felt a pit form in his stomach. His palms felt sweaty. The feeling of fear was nauseating, and as the man spoke, his voice was screeching yet whispering all the same. Nakashaitakua. And at once, the vision faded as a wave of dark side energy hit Jolie head on. The older man let out a strangled gasp as he fell to his knees, his form shaking as sweat dripped from his forehead. Old man Jolie. Several of the Mandalorian crew yelled in mild alarm as they rushed to the older man's side. His antics were always a mild reprieve from the dull routine of space travel, so he had become something of a treasured crewmate despite his history as a Jedi Knight. Jolie struggled to catch his breath as the younger Mandalorian recruits helped him to his feet. Candaras stood in front of him and griped his shoulder in order to hold him steady. What's wrong, old man? Need the medic? He questioned gruffly, hiding the tone of worry in his voice. Che checked the sensors. Jolie gasped out. Candaras looked to the technician and nodded his assent. The man turned and after several seconds, he spoke. Nothing on sonar or long-range radar, sir. Jolie finally caught his breath as he straightened. What range do those sensors have? 20 clicks in all directions, sir. Jolie shivered. 20 clicks. This being could deliver such a powerful wave of fear from more than 20 clicks away. Just what monstrosity was that creature? It couldn't be human. You all right, old man? What ya sense? Nothing. Jolie shook his head. Ah. I'm sorry. Years must be catching up to me, I guess. He mumbled as he grabbed onto one of the nearby Mandalorian recruits. Can ya help me to my cabin, kiddo, in case I get another of these little attacks again? Yes, sir, the youngster replied as he helped him out the door. Candaras watched Jolie leave, eyes narrowed behind his visor. The old man had felt something, and judging from his reaction, a big something. He'd have to question him on it later. The feminine voice of the computer again broke through the minor silence. Activating hyperdrive, the ship shuddered once before stars whizzed by their vision. Nahid as more of the mutant creatures passed by his side, their hissing and screeching voices reaching his ears as they hunted for him. Looking around the hall, he found a lone door with as much speed and stealth as he could manage. He ran down the hall and Dee slipped into the room, sighing in relief. The blonde took a look at the room and blanched as he caught sight of several things along the walls. Damn, Jeria could have a field day with some of this stuff. He was brought out of his musings as the voice of that girl he had met before reached his ears through the wall. What the hell do you mean you can't find him? He heard her voice to one of the mutant things as it replied. Mistress Intruder disappeared. We not FIIIINA short pause. Whatever. Just keep looking. If he escaped the base and reports this to Konoha, we'll have to leave to the next base over. Narrat cursed. Apparently, there was another base nearby. Looking up, he found another ventilation shaft. In an underground base like this, all ventilation shafts needed to lead up to the surface in order to keep cycling the clean air with the stale air from down here. The reason he hadn't done it before was because of all the creepy Krawis around. As he went under the vent in preparation to jump up into it, his blood ran cold at the sound of a door opening. Snapping his head around, he caught sight of Karen. As their eyes met, he watched her eyes fill with righteous fury. What the air you doing in my room? She roared, taking out a cane and twirling it in her finger. Your room? He questioned incredulously before he looked around to the items lining the wall. Can't say that's entirely unexpected, he remarked offhandedly. Karen growled before she lunged at him, her anger at the invasion of her room evident in her eyes. Na caught her wrists with his hand and slammed her against the wall, pinning her wrists above her head with one hand and using the her hand to place his forearm in her mouth, muffling her shouts of anger lest the mutant things hear her. Using the force, he activated the lightsaber and held it so it was tantalizingly close to her throat. Immediately, her frantic struggles ceased as the purple blade hummed much too close to her flesh for comfort. Now then, Na spoke slowly, catching his breath and composing himself. What is Sound doing here? And how many other bases do you have? Karen looked momentarily torn before she pushed herself against the wall, surprising the blonde as the whole wall fell back with a crash. It was a fake. Karen placed her feet on Naruto's stomach and heaved him off her, then rolled back so that now she was straddling him. Having lost his concentration, the lightsaber clattered on the floor harmlessly as it deactivated. Karen raised her cane but again had her wrists caught by the blonde ninja before he flipped him over, this time with him straddling her. He grabbed the knife out of her hand and held it onto her neck. Looking over the new room to make sure none of the freaky mutant things had come through the walls again brought his eyes to several more items along the walls. These in far more numbers and far more interesting. Just how would you use something like that? You are a freak, he muttered to himself. The distraction, however, worked seeing as how Karen delivered a brutal punch to his face, followed by a kick which sent him crashing into the wall at the end of the room, several of the items falling around him as the wall rattled. Before he could react, Karen's knee had connected with his stomach, and she grabbed the collar of his shirt. Bastard, she hissed. And before he knew what was happening, he felt a pair of lips crash down onto his own and a tongue slip into his mouth, meeting with his own with an almost fevered hunger. Momentarily confused by this turn of events, Naruto nearly missed the opportunity it presented. Grabbing a cane from his pouch as the tongue scraped along the roof of his mouth, causing him to shudder, the blonde slammed the butt of the weapon in the back of her head, knocking her unconscious. As she slumped forward, Naruto held her up, confused by her actions, but enjoying the taste of kinamo. Still on his lips and in his mouth. He had to admit it was a good kiss, and he could partially understand. After all, just how long had she been here with nothing but the company of these? He glanced around the room. Items also, it could be she was he forgot the medical term for it, but essentially, it was a woman attracted to power or strength. Still, it didn't matter. Whatever her reasons were, they were her own. Still, he should kill her. It was what any ninja would do. Still, he was also a Jedi or was trained as one, and killing someone in their sleep wasn't the Jedi way. Naruto sighed. He wouldn't be able to just kill someone like this, especially if that someone was as good a kisser as this one. So, carrying her back to her bed, he set her down. Looking to the lightsaber, discarded on the floor, he called it back to his hands. Looking back to the sleeping girl, he shook his head. Crazy bitch, he muttered before he leapt up into the ventilation shaft, making his escape from the sound base. XXXXXXXX. 2 hours later, Tenten, Nei, and Lee all sat around the table in Tuna's house. On the table was a map of the sewers. Okay, look, we can't just sit here for a whole day. Nei, if he's in trouble, he may not even last a day. Tenten said to the Hyuga boy, the area is still hot. Tenten, if we go back there less than 12 hours since we escaped, the place is still on high alert, and it would place us all in danger. He argued back. Before they could continue, the door opened, revealing the blonde-haired teammate they were currently discussing. Stepping into the house, he made his way past his teammates. I have made my way through a river of literal crap, been chased by freaky mutant things, an even freakier girl, and had to walk across an entire ocean. I just want a shower and a good bed to sleep in. Good day to you all. With that said, the blonde walked past them and into the bathroom where he would take his aforementioned shower, leaving 3 somewhat stunned teammates behind. Tomorrow, they'd be back on their way to Konoha. As the blonde finally sat down, his mind came to a screeching halt as he remembered. I forgot to get the info on the sound base. Come on, nah, why the hell won't you tell us how you escaped? Tenten wed cutely as she pouted at the blonde-haired boy who simply would not crack no matter how much they prodded and poked at him as they made their way back to Konoha. They had left Wave with a somewhat long goodbye from Zuna and his family. The road back was long and boring. They were behind their planned schedule already, mainly because Na couldn't stop smiling and staring at his name on the bridge until Lee had to practically carry him away. Na sighed and glared at her from the corner of his eye. Tenten, would you please just drop it? I'm not telling y'all what happened, and that's final. She huffed and crossed her arms in annoyance and anger. Well, whatever, I'll just read the mission reports later. She finished somewhat smugly. Naruto growled in annoyance, remembering that mission reports for all C-rank missions and below were open to the public, as were B-rank, unless the Hokage deemed their information classified. A rank and above were always classified to all but high-ranking Anbu, the Hokage, and the team that went on the mission. Saturn could easily go down to the archives and get the report later, like she said. And if he cut out pieces of the report, which with his luck he would undoubtedly be, he'd be charged with treason and either demoted or held in Kona's penitentiary for 6 months. Then when he'd get out, they'd demote him 1 rank. Of course, seeing as how he's a genin, the only thing left would be academy student, meaning he'd have to go back to Ruka-sensei's classes. How did he know this? Well, simple. Because some jackass had tried to do it when he had filled out the report from the Wave mission so long ago, claiming that he had lied in the report, refusing to believe he had saved Kakashi or that the great Uchiha had his thoroughly handed to him. His teammates never knew about it. Kakashi did end up pulling his out of the fire when he backed up his mission report with his own. Still, it had been a harsh introduction into the bureaucratic world for the young ninja Jedi hybrid. Nei and Lee hung back, watching the interaction of their female teammate with their blonde-haired comrade. It was somewhat strange for them. Usually, their missions were escort missions or scouting missions, both of which she usually did not have another male heritage to speak to besides them. The fact that she was so talkative with him, as well as somewhat teasing in her own playful manner, was certainly sending a mixture of emotions through the 2 young Konoha ninja. With Lee, it was more like a brotherly protectiveness. Meanwhile, with Neji, as was the green little acid at the base of his throat called jealousy. Tenten stopped for a moment before looking at the sky above. Hey guys, it looks like it's going to rain. Nei looked up to the heavens and indeed it was going to rain and they had barely made it past the halfway point a few minutes ago. All right, let's set up camp then. Leo, get firewood. Tenten, go and get a deer or something for us to eat. Nah, help me set up the camp. The team nodded before they each set their packs down and went off to accomplish their assigned task. XXXXXXXXXXXX as the Mandalorian ship began its procedures for exiting hyperspace. The crew looked on in silent wonder and anticipation. This would be the first system to be discovered beyond the outer rim of the galaxy. And even though they were warriors by trade, not usually caring about any scientific discoveries that weren't centered around their battles, weapons, or opponents, even they couldn't really find apathy to this discovery. Jolie watched as the younguns gathered around the main windows and screens to view the destination they had spent so many resources in their effort to arrive. Mandalore, Arcanderous, as he knew him, stood next to him, arms crossed as he looked at the men scurry about in thinly veiled excitement as He began to slip out of hyperspace. Oh, to be young again, Jolie chuckled as he stood on somewhat shaky legs, weakened by age, and far too much activity. The older man looked to the Mandalorian leader with a smile on his face as he spoke. Well, you must be excited. Not only do you discover another solar system, meaning you also get to name it, but you also get to find Revan again. Canderous snorted beneath his helmet. Look at them. Little BRZ don't know the first thing about Mandalorian composure. Oh, shut up. Jolie waved him off. They're young. Let them enjoy it while they can. Soon enough, they'll be old and brittle like us. Who the hell do you think you're calling brittle, old man? Canderous said, glaring back at him. Jolie scoffed as he waved him off again. Please, I'm legally blind. My bones hurt like hell, and I sure as hell ain't as fast as I used to be. And you have so many implants and stems going through your veins. Soon we'll be able to harvest your blood to make an energy drink. Why the hell did I bring you onto this ship? Canderous questioned himself as he placed his hand on his helmet, shaking his head. Oh, shush. Without me, you'd still be stuck in dark space. Suddenly, the computer flared to life as the young engineer looked back to them. My Lord Mandalore, we're picking up a beacon. It's faint, but still operational. Where's it coming from? Canderous asked as he looked to the main navigation screen. From the 3rd planet, closest to the sun, sir. Then that's our destination. What's our estimated time of our evil moving at full speed? 7 hours, sir. Canderous nodded. Good. Set the course. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX she found one of her teammates was missing. "Where's Na?" she questioned as she dumped the deer next to the fire pit Lee had been setting up before she arrived. It was Nay, who was currently occupied with wiring the traps around the camp, that answered her. "He's training over in the next clearing about 30 yards east from here." Training in what? She questioned as she took the kanai from her pouch and cut open the animal's stomach and began the process of preparing the usable meat for cooking, removing the organs and other pieces that would be too tough too nasty to eat. After a while in which the team spent in comfortable silence as they went about their tasks, Nei broke the silence. Tenten Lee, he called them, catching their attention as he paused contemplatively. Naruto's new abilities. Don't you find them a bit odd? Nei has an ability to move things with his mind. Of course, I find it odd. Tenten answered flatly. Not in that way, Tenten. Neji spoke with hints of annoyance in his voice. Even with the help of a sonin, it's still unbelievable even for him to be able to create so many techniques in such a relatively short amount of time. People that create original techniques with chakra alone can take years to master them. Yet, he creates a wide range of new techniques using something completely different from chakra. And having them in such an advanced state that they can be used in actual combat. It just seems Naotic flair. I am ashamed of you suspecting our good friend and comrade Naruto-kun of deception. He has been nothing but honorable and hones. Lee, shut up. I'm not saying he's lying to us. Not really. But I do feel that he's hiding something from us. The white eyes genified as he really did feel somewhat guilty at questioning his friend's honesty and integrity. Tenten spoke next. You have the Bakugan. Should NTU be able to tell if he's lying or not? You've always been able to do it before. Negi sighed. That's just it. I've tried reading him, but it is difficult. Extremely so. I believe that even by himself before he acquired these powers that Na was actually a great exerciser of hiding his true emotions. But with these new abilities, it's like there's a thin veil surrounding him, keeping him from being truly seen by anyone. The strangest thing about it, though, I don't think it's coming from him. That brought pause to the other two. You think that someone else is influencing him? Not influencing, more like shielding from what though? I have no idea. He fancied as he glanced to the forest where Naruto had gone. After a while of silence, Tenten simply shrugged. Whatever. It's not like we can do anything about it now. She stood up as she wiped her hands clean from the blood of the carcass. Well, no use standing around here. I'm going to go get him. Lee, can you set this thing up to start cooking? Of course, Tenten-chan, Lee answered exuberantly as the weapon mistress made her way out of the camp and towards where Neji said Naruto was training. It was a few minutes later that she found him. It wasn't hard really. That purple sword of his was about as subtle as a boot to the face. She found him practicing a strange form of kata, a form she had never really seen before, which was rare. She knew almost all forms of kenjutsu-based fighting style. At least the theory behind the style and way to identify and counter it. But this one was indeed something beyond her knowledge. She'd ask him what it was once he was done. For now, she would just watch. Na calmly went through the motions of the Shin lightsaber form. This form harnessed the emotions of the wielder. To add to its strength, it was a strong, well-balanced, if slightly aggressive style of combat. It was a mild, subtle mixture of a broadsword style of fighting with kendo. This was the style he was most comfortable with. His mom had oriented him in all styles of the lightsaber forms. He had then chosen his favorite to study and master. He also practiced the Ataru form, a form that used mobility a lot during combat, flips, jumps, and quick motions to dispatch opponents. It was very, what was the word his mom had used to describe it? Flamboyant, but because of its reliance on movement, it was weak in very tightly packed areas. Of course, in a forest like this, with his ninja training, it would certainly be at its strongest. The most basic of all forms was the Shito. It was the basis for all other lightsaber forms. Its simplicity was its weakness, as well as its strength. Because of its simplicity, it could be easily broken down by an experienced fighter, and the weaknesses could quickly be exploited. But in turn, it allowed the user to quickly adapt to changes in the battle that would be extremely difficult to do with other more specific forms. The Makushi was a form specifically designed for lightsaber-on-lightsaber combat. It was a style that wasted very little energy. In fact, most of the movement was done with the wrist and some quick yet simple footwork, almost like a rapier. It took extreme focus and patience to master. He had never picked it up because there was never any other lightsabers to worry about. Mom claimed that she was a master of the Makushi form, but he had never had the chance of seeing her in action. Though he never knew what a master of the style could really do. Sortsu was the defensive style. It focused almost entirely on defense and exploiting mistakes in the enemy's stance. This of course would fit him, being a stamina freak who could afford the possibly long and drawn out fights this style W. Old create if used against another opponent with a lightsaber. But again, no lightsabers to worry about, so he never really picked it up. Mom did say that her old friend from her wearing days, a guy called Jolie, was a good Sortsu user, though. The Neiman form was the diplomat's form. It didn't really focus on anything and was not a style frequently used by Jedi, especially in these times of war. Since it focused on almost all aspects of Jedi lightsaber combat, it didn't specialize in anything at all. The Juyo was a highly aggressive style and had little defense to speak of. He had thought of focusing on this style since he could heal quickly from any attacks that might get through because of the Juyo's lack of defense, but had decided against it at the last minute. Finally, the Vapid lightsaber form. It was his mom's ultimate fighting style. She had told him very little about it, except that this style brought one onto the very edge of the dark side. He sighed sometimes. He really wondered just how little he must know in comparison to other Jedi. I mean, his mother was a remarkable teacher considering the conditions she had to teach with. He just sometimes felt so inadequate compared to other Jedi he had heard about. It was with a sudden start he realized he had an audience. Tenton, what are you doing here? The bun-haired girl jumped slightly when he caught sight of her. Calmly, she stepped out of the brush and smiled at him. That was impressive. Nah, what's the style called? Narut smiled and scratched the back of his head sheepishly as he spoke. Hey, it's called the Sheen. Tenton nodded. It was kind of strange, but it seemed pretty well balanced. Did Jarya-sama teach you? Na was about to answer when another voice spoke up through the trees. Yeah, brat. Did that too, teach you. I didn't know he knew any kenjutsu. Narut and Tenton's eyes snapped over to where the voice had come from, where they soon saw the blue-black robed figure of one Hoshiki's, followed show. RTLY by the infamous Uchiha Itachi. Na immediately settled himself into a defensive stance with the double-bladed saber held in front of him. Itachi, the blonde growled. Tenton discreetly pressed a small button in her belt. Nah. Itachi nodded in response as he eyed the laser blade with no amount of intrigue in his eyes. I had heard rumors of a ninja wielding a purple blade that defeated Orochimaru. Was that perhaps you? A brief flash of amusement twinkled behind his eyes before it quickly vanished. If that is the case, then perhaps this will be more enjoyable than I thought. With a lazy raising of his arm, he blocked a kick from Leon for his head, and with his other one, he grabbed Neji's wrist as the Hyuga aimed a shot at his heart. His eyes closed before they reformed with the blood-red Mangekyo staring out to the world. Far more interesting indeed. Lee and Neji sprung back away from the elder and took their positions next to Narut and Tenton, eyeing the two Akatsuki members wearily. Naruto was nervous. While he held no fear of the Akatsuki himself, he knew that they would go to almost any lengths to capture him. That included killing any that stood with him. He would never forgive himself if one of his friends ended up dead protecting him. Suddenly Lee spoke up, catching their attention. Neji-un Narutkan Tenton-chan, Neji and I should face Itachi. We have less chance of being caught in his dojutsu. Ga-sensei has trained me in case I ever had to face him on how to fight an individual without having to look at his face. And Neji has the Byakugan so Itachi cannot make direct eye contact with him. Naruto, with your blade and close-range abilities, combined with Tenton's long-range skills, you shall be the perfect combination to take down Kizum, who is a close-range fighter. The entire team gave a pause, and a strange look crossed their features as they each slowly turned towards Lee. The look on their faces was the picture-perfect definition of what the Lee blinked before he spoke. What? Never mind, Neji said slowly before shaking his head to shake off his disbelief. That's a good plan, Lee. An oxymoron if he ever heard one. Tenton, he called right was her response. As she drew 8 shuriken, 4 in each hand, each wrapped in exploding tags before she threw them. Itachi and Kizum leapt off, each in different directions as the tags went off. Lee was upon the Sharingan user in an instant, punches and kicks flying as he tried to land a blow on the homicidal Uchiha. Itachi expertly blocked each attempted strike, but the green one's speed and raw power were proving difficult to keep up with, even for him. Eventually, one of the attacks got through, nailing him in the stomach, forcing the air out of his lungs in a rush, as it was followed by a brutal upwards kick to the face. Then, a spinning axe kick aimed towards his shoulder. Luckily, he was able to block it. Judging from the sheer strength behind the attack, it would have probably broken his shoulder completely. Itachi moved to counter when suddenly the Hyuga was upon him, sending swift strikes towards his chest and abdomen. Itachi was put on the defensive as he deflected attacks from both Lee and Neji. His sharing was strained to its limit as it continually predicted their movements forward enough to give him time to react. Finally, he found an opening. Latching onto Lee's fist, he pulled him forward and leapt up, placing both legs on either of Neji's shoulders and locking him around his head before spinning, throwing Neji to the ground and simultaneously twisting Lee's arm around enough to throw high to the ground. Keeping his grip on the taijutsu master's arm firm, he landed on his feet and moved to kick the arm he was gripping near the elbow, which would break it. But Lee was not a taijutsu master for nothing. Pushing himself up about 2 feet with his other arm, he managed to absorb the blow successfully and use the extra momentum from the attack to continue rising enough to get to his feet and deliver a kick to Itachi's face, only for it to be blocked and have himself thrown away towards Neji, who had been charging the Uchiha as he got to his feet. Neji ducked under his flying green teammate and attacked the Uchiha, his hands laced with glowing blue chakra. Itachi cursed. He had gotten rusty with his close-range skills and he could feel the chakra burns forming along his arms. That was the first step of the Juken. Soon there would be muscle failure and then it would start wearing down on his bones, eventually shattering them. The last thing he could afford in this kind of fight would be his bones in his arms to be broken or brittle. What with Lee's strikes being as strong as they were. Lacing his palms with fire-based chakra, Itachi's sharing suddenly broke down and analyzed the Hyuga's fighting style, and in seconds he began to copy the Hyuga's taijutsu. Neji's eyes widened and decided he had better finish this now. Leaping back, he took the stance of the Hake. You are within my field of divination. He spoke before launching himself forward. His hands were little more than blurs as he attempted to close the Uchiha's tenketsu. To his utter surprise and horror, however, he only succeeded in closing 6th of the targeted tenketsu. A painful but hardly crippling blow. Itachi cursed before he delivered a powerful spin kick that connected with Neji's face, knocking him to the floor. Suddenly, a hand gripped his hair and yanked back, exposing his throat as a kunai slashed it open. Lee sighed in relief only for it to die in his throat as Itachi's form suddenly melted into a puddle of water. Spinning around, he looked for the Uchiha only to hear a voice coming from behind him. Hake Ryu show spinning around. He only managed to catch a brief glimpse of the Uchiha's form before he launched forward, rushing the taijutsu specialist in a display which showed just why he had been and still was considered a genius among ninja. He mimicked the Hyuga's Hake perfectly right down to how he positioned his fingers. Blood escaped Lee's mouth as burning pain tore through his body. Itachi didn't hit all the chakra points, but he had certainly hit enough. As his eyes reflexively traveled up to his opponents, he realized his mistake a moment too late. Neji scrambled to his feet just in time to watch Lee crumple to the ground, blood escaping the corner of his mouth, eyes rolled to the back of his head and utterly unconscious. As the Uchiha murderer turned to face him fully, Neji could only hope that Naruto and Tenten's fight was going better. If it wasn't, well, they were all in deep, XXXXXXXXXXX. Luckily for him, however, Naruto and Tenten were handling Kisame expertly. Due to the fact that Kisame was basically a kenjutsu specialist and knew only a few large-scale techniques to complement his fighting style, Naruto and Tenten were the perfect individuals to counter his mid to close range techniques. The lightsaber cut through Samada with ease as the Sharkman soon found out when it cut off a nice big chunk off the top. Naruto had kept on him the purple double-bladed lightsaber, creating a dazzling display as it cut through the air, as well as anything it came into contact with relative airs. Kisame, however, continued to dodge and counter well enough, keeping both himself and his prized sword away from the Jinchuriki's strange blade. But he was hard-pressed, especially with Tenten keeping up a constant array of numerous as well as extremely accurate long-range assaults with Kana and Shure. Icon. Finally, he found a breach in the assault long enough to form some quick hand seals and escape off into the trees as dozens of water clones sprouted from the moisture amongst the grass and air around them. Naruto skidded to a halt and blocked one of the clone samahades with his own blade, letting it collapse into water as it was chopped off, which was shortly followed by the kism as a kunai tore through one side of his neck and out the other, having been tossed by Tenten as she took out two curved bladed kunai in each hand. Naruto settled himself into the standard Ataru fighting position as Tenten landed behind him, her back to his. The weapon mistress looked over her shoulder and smirked. So, you think you'll be able to keep up even with that fancy sword of yours? Na looked back to her incredulously. We're fighting two S-class criminals, and you're thinking about a contest. She shrugged innocently. Why not? Na thought about it for a moment before he realized that there was no reason to really not enjoy kicking the Sharkmans. Looking back to Tenten, he smirked. Maybe I should injure myself. Make it easier for Ya. Tenten smirked before she twisted her body out of the way of one of the kism swings and leapt up above another before standing on top of the shoulders of the first. She twirled her kunai in her hands before driving it into the back of the kisami's skull. Water escaped from the injury. Leaping off with a graceful twirl, she slashed at the next clone, catching him on the shoulder before she threw both her curved kani at two other clone, catching both in the chest and stomach, respectively. With a smirk adorning her features, she drew her gloves. Na was also showing off some as he blocked many of the strikes with ease and subsequently proceeded to cut down the clones with similar efficiency. With a leap, the Force user bounded over the group of clones and got right in the thick of it. When they said that water clones were 1/8 as strong as the original, they were right in almost all aspects, whether it be speed, physical strength, or endurance. The clones were really nothing compared to their original. Ansana used both his heightened senses as a ninja and Force affinity for prediction, was able to avoid all of the strikes and counter them relatively easily, whether with a punch, kick, or technique. Hey Na, he heard Tenten call out to him. Looking over his shoulder, he saw her smirk and extend her hands towards him. Eyes widening in alarm, the blonde ducked down, his hands going over his head to protect himself as Tenten's wires tore through the Mitsubushins like they were made of rice paper, allowing them all to collapse into puddles of water. As the water settled, Naruto looked up and growled at Tenten. What the hell? Are you nuts? Oh. Calm down. I wasn't aiming for you. She waved off his concern, making Naruto flinch. He didn't want her moving her hands at all. They were dangerous enough held still. Suddenly, Neji's form shot past them, smashing against a tree with an audible crack. The Haug prodigy growled as he stood up, spitting out some blood as he straightened. Ni, where's Lee? Tenten questioned, startled by her teammate's beat-up appearance. Currently unconscious, the Hyuga grounded out as he picked himself up fully. Itachi stepped out of the trees, his form, looking a bit disheveled, but nonetheless unscathed. He looked around for his partner before he allowed his eyes to travel back to Na, who was looking at him, but avoiding his eyes. Na, as you know, we are only here for you. Surrender now, and none of your friends will have to be hurt. Otherwise, well, who knows? The threat hung in the air, and soon enough, Kisum walked out of the trees. Numerous small cuts from Tenten's Kana assault adorned his face and arms, as well as several holes and tears in his cloak. The top piece of the Samaha was completely melted off, leaving Kisum with an almost 4.5 foot long blade instead of its previous 6 feet. The anger that shined within his eyes was directed solely at Na and Na alone. He was most certainly not amused at his prized blade's fate. Na growled and gripped the blade of the lightsaber so tight the joints in his fingers cracked. Before he answered, however, Itachi was wrapped in wires and systematically torn to pieces by Tenten, promptly vanishing in a plume of smoke, having nothing but splinters. I got a new deal, she snarled. We take your dissected corpses back to Kona, get the reward, and go on with our lives. Crows suddenly flew from the trees forming above the kunoiki, revealing Itachi with a kunai already in motion to pierce her temple, only to be blocked by Neji, who had acted in time and got in the way, delivering a palm thrust to the Uchiha's chest with his free arm, only to have it blocked with relative ease before Itachi pushed him away and subsequently himself, since they were in midair. Blocking another spin kick from Tenten, the Uchiha used the force of her kick to propel himself back into the trees. Na moved to help them, but a wall of water sprung up from the ground between him and his teammates. Spinning back around, he found Kisum smirking a truly bloodthirsty grin. Oh no, kid, you and me still got some unfinished business in concerns to my sword. A shadow loomed over the blonde, snapping his attention back to the water. He barely had any time before it collapsed over him. His world went spinning for a moment, but he made sure to keep a firm grip over his blade. When he opened his eyes, he realized that he had been caught in a massive water prison similar to the one Kakashi had been caught in by Zabuza so many years ago. As he went to breathe, remembering that the technique still allowed the capture to breathe because it was meant as a way to hold and interrogate ninja in the field, he was surprised when he swallowed water instead. Though looking back, he probably shouldn't have been. Coughing and sputtering, his eyes traveled to Kizum as he placed his hand over his mouth. Kiss smirked, surprised. It's my own little creation. It was meant to hold a group of people at a time. But seeing as how I just got you, it'll have to make do. Once you pass out, I'll take both you and that little sword of yours. Na moved to swim out of the bubble, but his form didn't even move from its location as he struggled to escape, merely hovering there as he tried to reach the air. Yasi kid, other people have tried this idea before me, but this jutsu requires a huge amount of chakra, something that I have in abundance, even comparing myself to the rest of the Akatsuki. The amount it would take to hold this technique for even 3 minutes is more than any average chunin has because you must practically flood the water with your chakra. That way, the person can scarcely move around. Your chakra makes the water heavier, thicker, and weighs the person down, but isn't dense enough to make him sink. So, you will always remain in the center of the bubble, no matter how much you struggle. Na began to panic as his lungs began to burn, but soon he heard that familiar voice in the back of his head. Remain calm, Na. Mom. Focus. Even yourself out. Wrap the force around you. Let it be your sustenance for now. Let it flow through your body. Remember what I have taught you. Na collected himself and closed his eyes, settling himself into a meditative position and deactivating the lightsaber. He felt the burn in his lungs gradually decrease as he recalled what had been taught to him. Many great Jedi Masters could supposedly use this technique to hold their breath for hours, even days. And if what Kisame said about this technique was true, he was most likely going to run out of chakra low. NG before he ran out of air. Kami's smirk died on his lips as the boy visibly calmed himself down and simply stayed in the bubble. After several minutes, he realized that somehow the boy was actually still breathing. He didn't know how, but somehow the little had managed to keep breathing. Realizing that he would be wasting chakra with a somewhat useless technique, the Sharkman growled before the smirk returned onto his lips, and he slowly stepped into his own watery prison. Naruto's eyes snapped open and looked back to Kizum, watching as the Akatsuki member began gliding through the water with no effort whatsoever. Kiss smirked. Right, well, Yasi brat. Unlike you, I can move rather easily in this water because it's my chakra that's sustaining it. So, it doesn't hold me back, but it will certainly hamper your movements far more than normal. Naruto's eyes widened, and soon Kisame reared back and shot forward like a bullet. Samahida, ready to swing and probably shave off a chunk of his arm if he let it. Sure of his victory, Kisame had to stop himself as the lightsaber that had previously been floating next to the blonde, appeared directly in front of him, the purple blade causing bubbles to rise as it boiled the water nearly to the point of evaporation. Kizum swam through the water with ease, displaying his fishy heritage as he struggled to dodge the blade. Finally, a distance away, the blade returned to Naruto's side, ready to defend him from any further charges made by the Sharkman. Kizum looked at the boy's face and realized that he was struggling far more than what he had been previously. It didn't take him long for him to realize why, or at least deduce why, and develop a theory. The blonde wasn't breathing at all, but was in fact using an advanced technique of sorts, one that probably demanded plenty of concentration. Now, whatever telepathy or chakra strings the boy was using to control his blade without touching, it was obviously either very draining chakra-wise or mental-wise. The boy most likely wouldn't be able to keep this up if pressured. Add to that the fact that he cannot move from the center of the bubble made him an easy target as long as his blade was occupied. Forming another hand seal, more Misabushins appeared outside the bubble. 7 of them actually, and each stepped in surrounding the blonde in a circular formation. Kisame smirked at the boy's fearful features. Oh. This was going to be fun. XXXXXXX. Itachi's sharing slowly spun as he analyzed Tenten's fighting pattern with her wires. It was difficult, incredibly complicated. The wind and earth elements mixed into it were utterly brilliant, and the sheer speed they possessed had nearly dismembered him on several occasions. And even with the Hyuga engaging him in such close proximity, she wielded the things in such a way that it was never any danger to the boy and reacted instantly to any changes in the battle, either retracting or cutting off the chakra into her wires when Nei was in danger of being cut. Itachi had tried on several occasions to throw the Hyuga into their path, only to have the wire hit him and brush off harmlessly or not hit at all. Swerving to the side, he watched as the edge of his cloak was shredded by the wired weapon, leaving it like a tattered rag more than an actual cloak. He was forced to block another strike of the Hyuga and leaned back, watching as a small trickle of blood ascended up to his eye level from a new tiny cut along his neck. Pushing Nei off, he rushed towards Tenten, throwing two kunai ahead of himself, watching with his sharing as her wires tore the things apart before they even reached her. He also managed to finally see where they were. With a spinning lunge, the Uchiha managed to snake his way past them, seeing two more wires appear in front of him. He pushed fire chakra into his hands and grabbed them, ignoring the incredible pain as the wind chakra still managed to dig into his hand almost half an inch. Throwing the wires off, he rolled, got to his feet in front of her, grabbed her by the throat, and drew a kunai with his free hand, ignoring her startled cry as he moved to stab it into her forehead. As he moved to do so, however, something slammed into his side, knocking him away with a force that would have probably been strong enough to break his ribs if it hit him in the proper area. Tenten reacted and drew her wires to catch him as he was in the air, replacing himself with a blade of grass. Itachi looked in the general direction he had felt the hit come from and nearly found Naruto within Kisame's water bubble, his form now bleeding from a slash towards his midsection recently received if the fact that the blood was just now beginning to flow through the water. XXXXXX bubbles rose up from the water as Naruto groaned in pain. He had heard Tenten's scream of pain and had reacted when he had seen Itachi about to kill her. He had been able to hold his own against Kisame and his clones so far by spinning the blade around himself at an extremely fast pace and using his abilities to predict and slow down the incoming attacks, at least marginally. All of this was a great strain over his ability to keep himself breathing, and the mental stress was beginning to show as his vision began to blur with each constant use of his powers. He didn't know how much longer he'd be able to keep it up, especially now when he helped Tenten. He had slowed down for just about half a second, but that was enough for Kisame to exploit as he shaved off a massive chunk of his skin from his midsection. The pain was almost blinding in its intensity. He had to end this, and he had to do it now. Calling the force to his fingertips, he heard his mother's voice cry out in his head, "No, that's too unstable in this. CNBIROMENT. She calmed herself before she spoke again, though her voice still held the slight edge of panic. You may not be able to stop it from harming you. You see, I'm sorry, was his only response before lightning exploded from his fingertips. Kami's eyes widened considerably before pain tore through his whole body. His teeth ground together so tightly one of them actually chipped. Spasms ripped through his body and he released the Samahida from his waning grip, allowing it to float soundlessly down to the floor. Sparks flying off the scaled blade. Na himself was also struggling. Controlling force lightning in itself was demanding. Anyone careless enough to let it escape them could let it head every which way and eventually backlash on them. But controlling force lightning in the water was near impossible. He struggled to keep the lightning from touching him. But because of this, he couldn't hold up his breathing technique for even a split second, and the burning in his lungs was almost agonizing. His vision began to swim, and he could only hope that Kisame would drop the jutsu soon. Kiss ground his teeth together, electrical burns appearing over his skin, defined by small black patches. His gills were burned together, and the spasms were getting so bad he had actually sprained his left ankle. ND snapped his right wrist by twisting it too hard. Gritting his teeth, the Sharkman managed to control his movements enough to launch himself forward. Not being able to react, the blonde barely managed to recognize what was approaching before Kisame's skull smashed into his face and everything went black and the water prison dissipated. The other three who had paused in their fight due to the dazzling and yet horrifying display were each brought back to earth. Tenten and Neji shared a glance and rushed, one to get in Itachi's way, the other to grab Na. But Itachi was having none of it. Shooting past the two Konoha ninja, he effortlessly formed two shadow clones. One to grab Kisame and the other to grab Sama. No, Tenten yelled as she launched her wires towards him, turning in midair. Itachi's eyes morphed into the Mangekyo. Amataru black flames exploded from his eyes, destroying the wires instantly, as well as shielding him from view as he vanished into the shadows of the trees. The two ninja rushed after them, following with the use of Neji's Byakugan. But Ataki's speed was too great and soon he was out of sight of even the Hyuga prodigy. They rushed back to grab Lee and moved full speed towards Konoha. Would have to be warned. Akatsuki had captured Naruto. They had captured the Kyuubi. Ren sighed as she opened the chamber to Revan's room. Same old around here. She loved Revan to death. The woman had done much for her when she was younger and helped her get over Obito's death. But even so, couldn't she have hired 2 bodyguards? Yeah, no. Give one some free time every now and then. If she had to spend another 15 years in this damn ship, she'd lose her mind soon. When she walked over to Revan's bedside, however, what she saw caused her to drop the tray of fours and antibiotic. ICS in surprise. Silent tears leaked from Revan's closed eyes. She was crying. So guys, what do you think about this Naruto story? Tell me your opinion in the comments. And if you want more Naruto what if stories, make sure to subscribe to Universe of Naruto. Thanks for watching.